Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the unseen forces that drive our most painful relationships, and we're starting with a very common yet incredibly intense domestic struggle. Have you ever noticed how the conflicts that completely drain us usually aren't with random strangers, but with the people closest to us? Well, today we're breaking down a deeply fascinating lecture that gets right to the root of human conflict. It challenges pretty much everything we think we know about why we fight, who is actually to blame, and how the universe itself responds to our pain.
It's the ultimate question, isn't it? Why is it that the people we love the most cause us the absolute greatest pain? To figure this out, we're unpacking a brilliant source lecture on family dynamics, focusing specifically on the notorious, age-old clash between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law. But this isn't just about family drama, not at all. The source uses this highly specific relationship to uncover a much deeper truth about human nature, attachment, and the invisible laws that govern how we interact with one another.
Let's jump right into Part 1, Era of Constant Conflict, Understanding Reality.
Right now, as the source points out, we're living in an era that is completely defined by friction. We experience literally every type of conflict imaginable: social unrest, falling out with friends, intense workplace drama, and of course, those bitter family and in-law clashes. Why? The speaker argues that fundamentally, we simply don't understand the basic laws and duties of how to treat each other. We're entering into relationships totally blind to the actual mechanics of human interaction. And, when you operate without knowing the rules, friction is really the only possible outcome.
Moving right along to Part 2, the stolen son complex, a mother's view.
Okay, let's look at what happens when a son marries. The mother goes through this massive psychological shift. She spent decades raising, protecting, and cherishing this kid. So in her mind, whether she consciously realizes it or not, he is her prized possession. The text explains that when a new woman, the daughter-in-law, enters the picture, the mother instinctively feels that her most precious possession has literally been stolen. Even if the son still visits, his primary allegiance shifts to his wife, and to the mother, this feels like an absolute theft.
This gives us a brilliant breakdown of the exact psychological progression that leads to the conflict. First up, the mother pours her life into raising the child. Second, all that immense effort creates this deep, unbreakable attachment, this feeling of mine. Third, that attachment morphs into outright greed, a desire to keep and control what she feels belongs to her. And finally, when the son marries, that greed is threatened, instantly triggering an unconscious resentment toward the daughter-in-law. It's almost an animalistic instinct. The mother-in-law often dislikes the daughter-in-law without even consciously knowing why. She just feels a deep, unexplainable friction.
Which brings us to Part 3, Greed and Ignorance, the hidden culprit.
Now for this explainer, we actually need to completely redefine the word ignorance. Throw out whatever definition you currently have. The speaker argues that this blind resentment we just talked about is a form of profound ignorance. But it's not about a lack of schooling or intelligence. It's a literal blindness born directly from her greed and her intense attachment to her son. When greed takes over, it acts like a blindfold, totally shutting down our ability to see reality clearly or act rationally. There's a really stark paradox at play here. The source explicitly points out that you could have a PhD, you could have studied abroad, you might possess an incredibly high intellect. But the absolute second you become greedy, whether it's greed for money, status, or for your own children, you instantly cross over into the greedy mind. You become completely ignorant. Your degrees mean nothing at that point, because your vision is now entirely obscured by attachment and the illusion of ownership.
The moment you become greedy, you become ignorant. This quote is highlighted in the text as the ultimate trap for intellectuals and everyday people alike. Your vast education and all your logic are instantly neutralized when you fall into the trap of claiming things or people as yours. The mother-in-law isn't acting out of pure malice, she's acting out of an ignorance that was forcefully triggered by her own greed for her son.
Let's dig deeper into that in Part 4, The Nature of Knowledge, Deconstructing Ownership.
The text beautifully explains that the knowledge you possess in your head right now isn't actually yours. You didn't just invent it out of thin air. It's an energy forged over hundreds of millions of years of evolution. It was built on the sweat, the tears, and the very real sacrifices of countless past generations of human history. All of those lives, all of that past struggle, was buried to create the foundation of the modern knowledge energy that we all get to enjoy today.
Because of that, the very idea of my knowledge is a total fallacy. And by extension, thinking in terms of my son, my wealth, or my possessions is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the universe actually works. We're just temporary stewards of this energy. Believing we own these things is what fuels the greed, which then triggers the ignorance, which ultimately causes the conflict.
All right, here is part 5, the universal law of pain. Who is at fault? And honestly, this brings us to a cosmic rule from the source material that is going to completely challenge how you view every argument you've ever had.
The speaker uses a really stark, physical metaphor to break this down. Imagine a physical fight. If someone hits you, the person throwing the punch hurts their hand a little bit. But you, the one getting hit, you feel immense, overwhelming pain. Now, society tells us the hitter is entirely at fault, but the universe, according to the source, measures fault very, very differently.
When we apply that physical metaphor to emotional conflict, we arrive at this harsh but incredibly profound and natural law. The one who hurts more is the one at fault. I know it sounds entirely backward, right? But the source argues that in the eyes of cosmic law, the person experiencing the most pain is actually the one who made the biggest mistake, usually because their attachments and ignorance are causing them to clash violently with reality. Basically, your pain is exactly proportional to your own mistakes. Let's bring this all the way back to the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law dynamic. In these clashes, who usually suffers the most profound, agonizing heartache? The mother-in-law. Which means, according to this unyielding law of nature, the root fault lies with her. Not because she's evil, but because her attachments, her illusion of ownership, and her resulting ignorance are creating her massive suffering. And you can see how this builds a vicious, unending cycle. Step 1, you feel pain. Step 2, because it hurts, your first instinct is to blame the other person. Step 3, by pointing the finger at them, you completely fail to look inward and see your own fault and your own greed. And Step 4, the source guarantees that if you do this, the universe will ensure that exact same pain comes back to you again. If you don't learn the lesson of your own attachment, the universe will just repeat the lesson until you do.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question that really challenges everything we've been taught about conflict. Who are you currently blaming for your own pain? If this natural law holds true, that your immense pain is actually a signal of your own misunderstanding and your own greed, then what attachments in your life are causing your suffering right now? Take a hard look at what you're fiercely claiming as yours. It might just be the very thing blinding you. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this fascinating perspective, and I'll catch you next time.